Good evening, everybody. I'd like to announce the fact that we've got Robin Davis, who's the head of new trains for TPE. He's going to talk us through the introduction of 3 new fleets of trains that TPE have purchased from between CAF and Hitachi, and he's going to run us through that. If any of you have got any questions throughout the broadcast, please submit them, and Elliot, who is the Northwest Network and Development Manager, will communicate these out with Robin at the end, and Robin can answer them. I'm going to hand you over to Robin now. We've got a couple of videos in here. There might be a couple of technical problems. I apologise for that in advance, but hopefully it should all run smoothly. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everybody. So I'm Robin Davis. I'm head of new trains for TransPennine Express, and I thought we'd kindly asked by the young rail professionals to give a talk on Nova and the introduction of our 3 new fleets that we've been working on for the past 3.5 years. And so we were going to do this in reality, but we're going to see if we can do this virtually. So we'll give this a go. Okay, I'm going to switch that off. Hopefully press the button. So TransPennine has had quite a few different trains over its years, running both across the Pennines and more recently sort of up and down the West Coast and East Coast main lines. You can see sort of some of the things from the past, and I think I wanted to illustrate this by showing what customers have experienced previously, but where the Nova transformation has taken and is taking TransPennine. You can see sort of on the sort of top right is the Class 185 DMU that has served TransPennine well for probably about the past 10 years, and continues to do so. And then probably the rolling stock before that, in terms of the Class 158, just below that. So, but as I'll show you, quite a transformation from those trains to where we are now. Oops. Right, we have a video to show you to start with. So hopefully, Ben, are you going to do this one? Right, we'll give it a go, see if it works.
Hi Robin, can we try again with your presentation? I think we've just had a bit of an issue there with passing it over to Ben.
What would you like me to do?
I'm going to try and give you presenting rights again for your presentation, Robin.
Okay. Where do you want me to start?
Let's try the video again.
Okay, I'll start at the beginning.
Robin, I think the video isn't working, so if we just continue with a verbal presentation and cut our losses. Oliver.
Sorry, you have me muted, so that's why I was waiting to play it. Okay, let's give this a go. Right, okay.
Robin, apologies about that. I got kicked out of it there. So for the next one, if you wouldn't mind talking the audience through what's going on, or if that's not suitable, we can skip that video and you could just perhaps summarize it, please.
Oh, okay, right. Hopefully some of you did see some of the video and got to hear some of it, and you saw my colleagues there who've been part of making the transformation for the north of the 3 new fleets. I hope some of you may have had an opportunity to travel on them, obviously pre the sort of COVID period. So I'll talk you through each of the 3 fleets, and also the big supportive activities primarily around depots and infrastructure that have been part of making Nova happen. So the first fleet, Nova 3, is a locomotive attached to a set of coaches, operates in a push-pull format, so the trains are fixed formation. People who may remember loco haul trains and talk about coaches being added or taken away, really this train is much more of a unit. It just happens to have a traction pack in one vehicle as opposed to distributed along the vehicle. So not really loco hauled, but we'll tell you some facts and figures about the trains. If we press the button, hopefully. There we go. So we've bought 13 of these trains. They're 5-car the coaches, 23-metre vehicles. They're called Mark 5A. I emphasise the A because CAF, who are the supplier of these from Spain, also built Mark 5 coaches for Caledonian Sleeper, and people refer to this. But in terms of why some key parts, apart from being day cars as opposed to sleeper vehicles, they are actually a different size. The sleeper vehicles are wider and slightly shorter, which is really important when you're doing things like doing gauging assessment, that actually you just can't rely on another vehicle providing the gauge clearance for your vehicle. They're push-pull, and they have but the locomotive is connected by a screw coupling rather than any form of fixed coupling or an automatic coupling, which is a new operational issue for TP to manage with. And we've have subleased the locomotives from Direct Rail Services. As Chris, my project manager, said in the video, we've done some modifications for the trains to talk to each other. But one of the big challenges is that the locomotives were built by Stadler in Spain, and the coaches are built by CAF, a rival firm, and the ability for them to talk to. So we had some interesting challenges in having one manufacturer's rolling stock in another manufacturer's factory, but we worked together and achieved that. They are actually 125 mile an hour capable vehicles, but they've been introduced at 100 miles an hour because the loco is a maximum speed of 100. And as Chris said, these are the first new intercity coaches for nearly 30 years on the UK network. Mark IV, which is still in operation on the East Coast on LNER and soon to be in operation elsewhere on the network. But those, and when my railway career started, those vehicles were coming into use. So that will give you an indication of how long I've been on the railway. The design does enable the formations to be extended in the future. You can build more coaches and insert them. But it's not the sort of thing you can add in overnight, so to speak, because like all modern trains, computer systems, it recognises what vehicles are in the formation. So the computer system has to be updated to know what's being added or even what's being taken away. It's got a CAF built as a driving trailer. So there's at the other end from the locomotive, there's a cab for the driver, and it mimics the Class 68 cab as much as possible, which was a constraining factor in the design because we needed to do as little as possible to the 68 cab because ultimately they will go back to DRS. But we didn't need to bring we had an interesting thing that the driving trailer had to be brought to the latest standards, which have changed since the Class 68 was built a number of years ago. But we also had to put in the ergonomic human factor considerations, which are really important in cab design. Interesting people seeing locos and loco haul, they're simple. Believe you me, this is easily the most technical and contractually challenging of all our Nova fleets. They are operation with driver guard only. There is no body side CCTV, and the other factor is there is no ETCS fitment for digital railway currently. There is a level of passive provision, but it is very, very small. The fitment of ETCS, if it ever happened to coaches, would require rebuild of the cab desk, for example, so significant. Just to give you a little flavour, so on the right, with lovely smiling Jason, one of our Pathfinder drivers, that is the Class 68 locomotive modified to work with the coaches, and on the left-hand side is the CAF Mark 5A driving trailer, and you see there's some very big similarities between the two. Most modern trains, well, actually all modern trains, will have some onboard computer system referred to as a train management system, TMS. Interesting, this has two TMSs because it has one for the train and one for the locomotive. So those two screens on the right-hand side are, the right-hand one is for the coaches and the left-hand one is for the locomotive. And then right on the left-hand side, another screen, and that is the automatic selected door opening system, which is a completely separate system. As you'll see, that's the same system that's on other CAF trains, such as our Nova 2 and Northern's 195 and 331 systems, and they'll roll that out onto their other UK products. Whereas on our Hitachi, the ASDO system is embedded in the TMS. But again, a big change for our drivers, moving from a unit operation where you'd have a single power brake controller, which is the modern way, whereas this has still got separate power and brake controllers. Again, quite a significant challenge for our drivers in terms of change. And so part of the training was that they learned to drive the locomotive first, and then we put the locomotive with the coaches, and then they work the two together. The pictures at the bottom are to sort of illustrate sort of the need for attention to detail in any project, and particularly a train one. On the left-hand side is the original design. That's the where you connect the locomotive to the coaches, and there's a connector and a pipe with all cables in, so all the comms between the two. And in somebody's hand was the original cover for it. And so when it was off, because normally at one end that would have a cable plugged into it from the CAF part, and that bit of flimsy piece of wire would hold that cap on probably for about 15 minutes of operation before it gets slung in the cess. So we had to change that out and put a much more robust cover on there, but something like that will take a train out of service. It will, in living terms, kill it. So really need to focus sometimes on the attention to detail. The trains are in service and have been since the end of August last year, and they're deployed on our route between Liverpool and Scarborough, and to come yet when we currently have 8 of the 13 sets we bought from CAF. We will deploy them on Manchester Airport to Middlesbrough and through to Redcar services, which we bought Redcar in at the back end of last year. They are maintained and looked after by Alstom in Longsight. The coaches are, and as you'll see, and the locomotive is looked after by DRS. When we bring the Redcar service online, we will start to do overnight servicing in York at Siemens, Lehman Road, which is interesting because ultimately the Siemens depot in York will be managing non-Siemens trains. Obviously, it was built for the Class 185, so that's a change to come. And we built the facility, and as we said in the video, we spent £35 million on depot improvements across the north, but one was building a very expensive petrol station, an overnight servicing facility in Scarborough. And you can see on the slide where our crews that will do that: Scarborough, York, Manchester Airport and Manchester Piccadilly. I did say this is the most contractually as well as technically challenging. This gives you the contractual matrix. So the coach is built by CAF, the locomotive is built by Stadler and modified by Stadler, but both leased, bought and owned by a Roscoe called Beacon Rail. Beacon lease the coaches to us, but lease the locomotives to Direct Rail Services, who then lease the locomotives, sublease those to us. DRS are responsible for looking after the locomotives, and they'll either do it at their facilities or on the Alstom site, or Siemens in York and Arriva Traincare look after the depot in Scarborough. TP does not do depots. We contract all that activity out. And then on the coaches side, we have a train services agreement to Alstom to look after the coaches. We have a train spares and but basically a support services and expertise continues with CAF. And then we separately have depot access agreements for looking after our trains with Siemens and Arriva Traincare in Scarborough. But as you can see from there, that is a really complex and a very different model to what TP has been used to. So the coaches were built, CAF have 3 facilities in Spain, a factory in Zaragoza, where the vast majority of the design work was carried out, and a manufacturing and design organisation in Bissain, in the Basque Country near San Sebastian, and they have a smaller factory in Irun. And the driving trailers were built mostly in Irun, but the main assembly was done in Bissain, but the design worked. But there's a roughly difference of several hundred miles between Zaragoza and San Sebastian. So when you're the guy on the factory floor and you're trying to work out, hang on, what the designer meant, rather than being able to sort of step out the factory and walk to the design office, which there is a design office in Bissain, no, the expertise was several hundred miles away in Zaragoza. So again, quite a challenging way, but that is how the manufacturer structures itself. Testing, although we did have the locomotive in Spain, the conventional network in Spain is a slightly different gauge size to what it is in the UK. So testing needed to be done in the Czech Republic at Vilím. So we transported both locomotives, and we needed 2 locomotives because we had to do various rescue and different scenarios with them. And we had some big challenges there because at one point we had the locomotives that was in Spain. It was put on a boat back to the UK. It was then going to go by rail through the Channel tunnels out to the Czech Republic. However, it got through the tunnel, and then the French decided to go on strike for whatever reason, not to do with our locomotive, and we were at risk of it being impounded. So we had to get it back through the tunnel, and it then went on a low loader, got driven up the motorway to Immingham and put on a boat across to Germany to Cuxhaven, and then got railed through to the Czech Republic. And then we've obviously done some supplementary testing and verification in the UK. So there's some pictures of our train. See, on the left-hand side is the driving trailer alongside one of our 185 DMUs. On the top right, that's the locomotive in Leigh Station. And then a couple of interior shots for standard on the left and first class on the right. If you've travelled on our 185, even though we've done a fabulous, in conjunction with Siemens, refurbishment of them, they are a step change, but not just in quality, but in quantity, and very much moving to an intercity style with more tables, more luggage space, and more facilities. Seat numbers overall, so 185 is around about 180, 185 seats. These are about 290 seats. And in this particular train, for instance, we've double first class, which again is a mark of the commitment we are offering to the north. Now I'll talk about number 2. So this is a high-speed EMU to operate on the West Coast Main Line, 5-car formation, and different people have different views about which is the best looking of our trains. It's a question I often get asked of the 3 fleets, which is my favourite, but somebody would say they have children. I have no favourites. I love all my children equally. So Class 397 Nova 2, we bought 12 of these. They are a 5-car again, but they are, and the 23-metre again of rigid bar coupled electric units. They are capable of multiple operation, so we can run up to 10 cars with 2 pantographs, which again was one of the big technical challenges with this project. And it was only at the back end of last year, having entered into service and bought the first trains, did we actually get the relevant compatibility approval to run at up to 125 mile an hour with 2 pantographs in the air. As I said, they are a 125 mile an hour train. They are non-tilt, and they have achieved 125 several sections on the West Coast Main Line. The design does enable that you can extend them up to 8 cars. So similar to all our fleets, we can extend them, build them. But again, one of the challenges is that the manufacturer will put the relevant jigs to make body shells and stuff. How long do they keep them there for? Will they get an extra order? So quite often, if you say, oh, right, you've had these trains for a few years, and you say, right, I want to expand them, it's a big challenge that actually the cost of doing that might be not the same price that you paid for it before, because a lot of the stuff has to be started from scratch again. Another area, these are capable of driver-controlled operation or driver-controlled driver guard. We operate them driver guard, but the drivers do use the CCTV system as part of the final dispatch process in conjunction with our guard. So that's a safety enhancement that we've introduced on both Nova 2 and Nova 1. It's a multiple unit, and it has an auto coupler from Delna, as do our Nova 1 fleet. However, the coupler is at a lower height. One of the things that a modern train has to comply with is technical standards for interoperability across Europe. However, Europe has only decreed for very high-speed trains, so above 125 miles an hour, has prescribed what the coupler is. So as a result, there's still a lot of differences between couplers across not just in the UK but Europe itself, which from an operations point of view, and I have an operations background, that presents a big challenge if you've got to go and rescue something or get trains to work together. And similar to Nova 3, it has no ETCS fitment. It's very much passive provision, and similar, you would have to rebuild the cab desk to fit ETCS on this. So this is a West Coast main line service, and its principal service routes are from Manchester Airport through to Glasgow and Edinburgh. And we ran our first passenger service at the end of November last year. And then next week, we will run our first Liverpool to Glasgow service. TPE, as part of its franchise, as well as increasing the number of services on this route, brought a new service to connect Liverpool and Glasgow direct. And the Nova 2 facilitates this. We have all the trains, we bought all of these, and we've got nearly all our Traincrew trained. It's sort of on hold, but we're around about the 95% mark with our Traincrew. And hopefully when we sort of ease out of the COVID situation, we can finish off the last few. But these are again looked after by Alstom at Longsite in Manchester. And Traincrew, there's overnight stabling in Preston, and there's overnight servicing at Alstom's facility, but not the main depot in Glasgow at Polmadie, where Pendolino and Sleeper are looked after. It's on the opposite side of the tracks. Again, one of our depot areas that we increased in terms of spending some improving those facilities. The Traincrew, we've got conductors at Manchester Airport, Traincrew drivers in Manchester, Traincrew in Preston and in Glasgow, and we've significantly expanded TPE, the number of Traincrew we have in Glasgow. Prior to Nova, we had contracted in the operation of our previous Class 350 fleet from Freightliner, and then we built and operated a brand new driver depot. We had TPE conductors, but it's all now, they're all both drivers and conductors, because one of the other reasons, as we'll go on to, is that we've the Nova 1 fleet has enabled us to expand our services on the East Coast main line to Edinburgh, and therefore we also, those are supported by Traincrew out of Glasgow. A much simpler contracting structure, both for maintenance and lease, much more like the Class 185, or very similar to the Class 185. CAF built the trains. They are leased, they're bought by Evershot Rails Group, and we lease them, and then Alstom maintain them, and we also have a spares and technical support agreement with CAF. As you see there, so I've referred to Beacon, there's Evershot, there's another Roscoe. We also, our Class 185 fleet is also comes from Evershot. But the 350 that we EMU that we had before came from Angel Trains. So we're adding to the number of rolling stock companies that we deal with, which for my colleagues in Fleet Commercial, where they just had very simple arrangements to deal with, now they're getting more complex, which is one of the big challenges for TPE going forward. Similar, these are built by CAF as well, but the body shells were produced in Zaragoza, but the design experience and the assembly was done in Bassein. So slightly easier for when that guy on the shop floor trying to understand the design drawing, but there was manufacturing done in Zaragoza, and the body shells were transported by road to then be assembled in Bassein. Similar, tested in the Czech Republic, and to start with, and one of the key things there with an electric train is getting your EMC footprint before you then be able to take it out on the network. So it was really, really helpful to be able to do that on a high-speed test track in the Czech Republic. But one of the challenges that, as people probably well know, that the Nova 2 and 3 programs have run very late in terms of delivery. The Czech Republic test track was in high demand not just for our projects, but other UK projects. So some of the northern trains were tested there, though most of those were tested in Romania. But there were trains there from to go to Italy, to Germany, to the Netherlands. So a really big high demand for this test track. And there's talk a lot about whether the UK does that, and I think in South Wales there's potentially for a new test track, as well as the one that's in the Network Rails facility near Melton Mowbray. I lovingly know it as Old Dalby, but where some of the Hitachi stuff was tested. But yeah, really important you can get access to a test track. What was also interesting, we also did some testing on the ADIF, which is the Spanish equivalent of Network Rail. Spain has a number of high-speed lines, and the high-speed lines are built to the same gauge as the UK. And so there was the ability the trains could do that. And so there was a high-speed line built, which had very few trains on it. So it was basically available for testing in the middle of the day. And so we were running backwards and forwards. And we also did some fault-free running, quite a lot of fault-free running with the units there. Some images of the train. So top left is Nova 2, and alongside it, for those that don't know, that is the train it's replaced, the Class 350 D0 unit from Siemens, really primarily built as a commuter and outer suburban EMU, a very good one. And we had 10 of those, and they've returned and gone to the West Midlands franchise. But as you can see, quite a big step difference in what you look. And to prove that it is 125 mph. There was a picture of the Speedo where it was running out on the West Coast main line. And there's a picture of the cab. And you see a much cleaner desk than you saw with the Nova 3. And again, just some of the screens. So you have the ASDO screen on the far left-hand side. The two screens to the right of that are the CCTV ones for the body side. And interesting with this train, the TMS system is directly in front of the line of sight of the driver. And then you've got various other bits of cab, Speedo, PA, GSMR. And a lovely picture of one of the test drivers, not one of mine, getting quite close to the buffer stops. But it is a pointy nose train. And a big factor, so you saw in the video, Chris Nutton, the major projects director who I work for at TransPennine, talking about what the research they've done as part of the franchise bid. And one of the things that people said was that what different bits of the north that they lived in was, I like those pointy nose trains that go to London. I'd like to travel on one of those. So we have pointy nose trains. Don't go to London, but we certainly will take you across the north in comfort and speed. And then moving on to the final fleet, Nova 1. Class 802 bimode, so this is a train that can run in electric or diesel and does so on a daily basis across the Pennines. We've been operating these since the end of September across the north and I'll show you where they go. So they've basically got a pantograph and a transformer on each of the outer driving vehicles, and then there's an engine that is under the centre 3 vehicles, and that's where all the traction motors are to power that. All the wheels on the centre 3 vehicles are powered. It's got one of the highest, in fact, it has the highest ratio of wheel sets to power of any train in the country of this type. It is part of Hitachi's AT300 fleet, so it is a derivative that came out of the Intercity Express programme, and trains that are operated. So the Great Western calls theirs the Intercity Express train, LNER calls theirs the Azuma, Hull Trains calls theirs the Paragon, and they're fundamentally all the same train. Carpets and curtains may look a bit different, but 95% of the train is the same, and we've benefited from that in terms of sort of taking an existing bill, a couple of tweaks, but a lot less testing, a proven product. Still got its issues, but a lot more straightforward in doing that. One of the questions that we got asked at the time was, why we've got three different fleets, why didn't we buy one? Well, although this may be a bit ironic because we still haven't got our coaches, the requirement of the franchise bid was to get some expanded intercity style rolling stock into the TP franchise as soon as possible. Unfortunately at the time, primarily because the Hitachi ScotRail Class 385 program had run, there wasn't the production capacity across Hitachi sites to be able to deliver the trains that we wanted in time. So that's why we haven't, as I said, I touched on, and I haven't really talked a bit about my background. I should have done that at the beginning. Apologies, I'll touch on that in a bit. But as an operator, really, you want as little, you want as homogeneous fleet as you possibly can, both for operational purposes, customer communications, training, but also on the maintenance side, tools, spares, maintenance manuals. The more you have to do, the more you have to produce, the more work. And it's been a very busy 3.5 years for myself and my team. So we have 19 of these, again 5-car, but they're 26, so they're 3 meters longer than the other 2 fleets, which makes them slightly longer. They are capable of multiple operation. Generally, we don't have any plans to operate them on a planned basis, but in perturbed working, we could couple up to them. Again, twin pantographs. They are 140 mile an hour design. They're limited to 125 mile an hour by the infrastructure. As I said, they're based on the design that was developed for the Intercity Express program. But we use the higher engine output, and we have done 125 miles an hour with these on diesel. The design does enable them to, you can extend them up to 12 cars. So the others talked about up to 8. You could in theory have one of these up to 12 cars. Find some stations to try and fit it in might be a challenge. Similar to Nova 2, they're capable of driver controlled operation and driver guard, and we operate them as driver guard. But similarly, as I said, for Nova 2, the CCTV is used as part of the final dispatch check by the driver. Delno N coupler, same as Nova 2, but at the higher height, because this is above 125 mile an hour Euro TSI train, so it is at the TSI height. It does actually have ETCS hardware fitted, because that was a requirement of IEP, and it just sold as seen, but the software will need to be upgraded in line with development infrastructure when it's required. And there is quite a lot of talk about TransPennine route upgrade and digital railway being fitted, but we'll wait and see. It is a train, these principal routes from Liverpool through to Newcastle and on to Edinburgh. And Newcastle to Edinburgh was a new route for TPE at the back end of last year, so expanding our network, and also Manchester Airport through to Newcastle. And as you can see, it's looked after by Hitachi's main base in Doncaster and their sub base at Craigentinny in Edinburgh, and then servicing at Heaton in Newcastle, York with Siemens, and Alstom at Edge Hill. And those are the various Traincrew depots. One of the challenges here, and one of the for the new trains project, was the mothership being at Doncaster was not on our route. So it's been a challenge, and we continue to face that actually it was a brand new route for our drivers to learn. So we're not only just learning new traction, and every driver at TPE will be learning something new apart from those on our south route. So learning that, and these are significant bits of route to do, but if you don't have the train crew to be able to transit them back and forth to the main maintenance depot, that has caused us some real headaches. And a big learn for it's not just about the trains or where they're going to enter in passenger service, but it's actually where they're going to be looked after and are your train crew. So again, similarly in Manchester, so the Siemens fleet that we operated with the 350 and 185 has been out of Siemens Ardwick depot. It's not that far from Longside. However, a whole bunch of drivers had to learn the routes not just onto Longside itself off the network, but the whole of the Longside depot, because we can be required to pick the new trains up or drop them off at any point on that depot, and it's not a small depot, believe you me. The other thing about this train is that it is capable of operating on the West Coast route as well as the East Coast. Part of that was what's known as residual value from the rolling stock company, because you spent a lot of money on the train and you really want it to be able to operate as much as on the network as it possibly can, because you never know, is it still going to be operated by TPE or in the future or somebody else. The other element is from a contingency point of view. If we had several sets at Craigentinny and Edinburgh, and there was a sort of some significant catastrophic failure of the line between Newcastle and Edinburgh, we want the ability to get those trains back onto our network. Similarly, as another example, our Nova 3 fleet, we have 2 of those maintained at Scarborough overnight. Again, the line between York and Scarborough, if that had a catastrophic failure, it's had flooding and significant flooding in the past, and a bridge over the River Ouse in York. So we actually had the route via what's known as the Walls Coast through Beverley to Hull, cleared, as a get out of jail card if that ever happened. Part of my railway background was I did experience that when I was at East Coast, where we had a HST at Inverness and the Highland Line was washed away for 35 days. That train primarily operates delivering services, sort of high revenue earning ones on the East Coast Main Line. You can't really have an asset stuck for over a month somewhere else, and it's very difficult to road some of these things out. So it's not just looking about the daily operation, but looking broader than that from an operations point of view, the what ifs. Leasing, and maintenance and servicing. So the trains were built a combination of so we had 7 built in Japan, and we had 12 built in Hitachi's Italy factory in Pistoia. Another Roscoe, Angel Trains. So they own them, we lease them, and then a much more simple and much more like the Siemens model we have with 185. A contract to look after the trains with Hitachi, and then Hitachi do all the relationship and the contract management with all those other depots. But as you see, if you overlaid all those sort of contract and leasing slides together, you'd see that's a big challenge for contract management and performance management for the fleet team. As I said, built in a long way away in Japan and Italy. We did very little testing required in terms of material type testing. We benefited from the other work done to date. We had a small amount of compatibility testing for degraded operation and some UK verification testing. Probably the main element of testing that was done in the UK was to do twin pantograph on the West Coast Main Line, and similar to Nova 2, this train has operated with both pans up in 10-car formation and single-car formation at 125 mile an hour on the West Coast non-tilt. Some pictures. So that's the first class in the top right, and then that's the driving cab on the bottom right. As you say, quite a flight deck of new kit. And that's on the first day of operation, and there's a very happy lady and one of my lovely colleagues who really enjoy traveling. That's the standard and significant step up. So these trains, so on Nova 2 I didn't mention, so they've got about the same, they're around about 290 seats, very similar to Nova 3, but this has 342 seats, and if we put 2 cars together, that's nearly 700 seats. And if we ever had to do that, say for perturbed infrastructure on the East Coast Main Line, we would be the biggest intercity train, bigger than LNER's Azumas on the East Coast Main Line, which, again, looking at the world of operations, so currently, prior to the Novas, that we were running the smallest trains on the East Coast Main Line with 3-car 185. So if there was any form of network reduction, single line working, whatever, some problem with the overhead line, we would be quite likely the first ones to be shunted to the sidings and people to travel on, the likes of LNER or cross country. Now, even our base foot trains, single foot car formation, were bigger than cross country. And equally then, if we run 2 trains an hour between Leeds through to Newcastle, one service terminates at Newcastle, one goes through to Edinburgh, we could couple these 2 together and move a lot of people. So if anybody's familiar with this sort of operation, we would be first on the graph. So, and as you see in the top left hand corner, there's a silver train coupled to a red train, and it is technically possible for perturb working to be able to couple an Azuma and an 802, or similarly the Paragons that Hull Trains. Fundamentally it is the same train, and TPE did the technical contract management, development of the design, along with a colleague, Richard Vernon, from Hull Trains, who managed that. So it was fundamentally buying 24 trains, of which 5 have gone to Hull. So yes, so a dark blue train could couple to a red train. Not every single system will work, and obviously it's got slightly different things like seat reservation, but fundamentally if you just want to move people because the wires are down or the signalling system's gone, those are things you can live with. The power and the brake will work throughout. So if I just quickly go back on the top right hand corner, some of you might have noticed that in first class that's a slightly different look to the other fleets, and you see that on our other fleets we have leather, except it's e-leather. One of the challenges is trying to pass fire tests with modern trains, And on the CAF trains, that was well, I say we, but CAF burnt 45 seats trying to get us through the fire test to get the look and feel that we wanted. Unfortunately, on the Nova 1 fleet, that buying the new look was not part of the base purchase, so we had to do a variation of significant cost. So we weren't able to get the look that we wanted. Part of that was that is the same seat that is on the CAF train. And all we wanted was, can we just buy some more from, or effectively, Hitachi, please, can you buy some more from the supplier? The supplier said, this is a new contract, so I want to design you, this will cost you 150,000 euros in base design cost. And we went, there are no design costs, I want part number 27A alpha. No, so as a result, that extra charge that the single supplier wanted to do this, meant that we haven't got e-leather on our Nova ones. Still, I think they look brilliant, and if you ride with us, I think you will enjoy it too. The other elements that quite often, if anybody saw our trains going to start with, they ran around grey. Again, the livery was not part of the original contract with Hitachi, so subject to a variation, and not just about a variation, was about actually got to apply it. So trying to find a 130-metre train shed for 5 days whilst you apply vinyl was quite a challenge. We have, I think have we got one left? No, no, we have done all of 19 now, but that has been, so initially these were being liveried in Hitachi's Doncaster depot, but whilst we started this and the time it took to get all the money sorted to pay for it, LNERs, Azumas were now going to service, so Doncaster went from a sort of facility to be a fully live operational facility, and the last thing you want in a depot is somebody doing post-production works. As a result, Hitachi found for us a facility in Eastleigh in the south, in Hampshire, and some people might have seen some of our trains going backwards and forwards. The other thing is Hitachi did some other work post-production at that site, and one of the main things from a technical point of view was the fitment of some additional equipment, sometimes referred to as filters, sometimes referred to as reactors, to minimise the EMC footprint after some issues were found with equipment on the East Coast Main Line and potential signal interference. All of that has been done now, but again, it's quite challenging when you really want to be having trains for service, having trains for driver training, having trains for post-production work. So really, you want to have everything done before it comes out the factory, but that's not always the case. Just a quick overview on the features of our trains. I've talked about they are significantly more seats, better tables, and they have massive amounts of more legroom. We have a significant increase in toilets. One of our challenges with the Siemens 185 toilet design, it's a bit problematic at times. And if you lose a toilet, you're down to one, and that's that, and then you lose one, and that's not really good at all. As you can read, you guys can look what's on there, but step change, seat reservation, electronic seat reservation, big uplift in luggage space, massive. We serve the second biggest airport in the UK, Manchester. We have a huge flow of people with luggage, which gets jammed in the aisles and our vestibules on our 185. So big step change in luggage space. Yeah, and also really important things like power out seat, and also, which I'll come into a bit about, we've now put on a dedicated galley kitchen onto our train, which is a big step up in our seat offering. But also one of the challenges for our business that's never had food and potable water on board. Technical features, again, I'm not going to run through everything on there, but some of the things I pick out: we have automatic selective door opening on the new trains to manage some of the short platforms. That's a GPS-based system. TransPennine a number of years ago had a serious safety incident where a passenger was trapped in a 185 door, not unfortunately seen by the conductor, and was dragged along the platform at Newcastle. We've invested in an additional facility on the Nova 2 and Nova 3. So it's what's known as an enhanced sensitive edge. Normally when a door closes, it's got a sensitive edge, so if there's an obstruction, such as a person or something else, it will sense it and the door will reopen. If the door then closes, and it has done that, and if you've got like something like a tie or a belt or something, or a coat and a coat button, might not pick it up. because once it gets interlock, it turns the sensitive edge off. Ours stays on for a short while afterwards as the train is departing out the station, and if somebody's pulling out of it, it will break the interlock and stop the train automatically. One other thing I'll probably pick out is the snow brake. So on our 2 trains that come in electric mode, we have, rather than traditionally when you have snow, disturbed or falling snow, it can build up on the brake system underneath, and therefore the risk is that when you go for the brake, there isn't, because it's clogged up with snow or ice. This traditionally the driver would be required to apply the brake manually, take it off, and put quite a harsh brake in to cleanse and heat the brake discs up, and results in speed restrictions. You're losing time. On our new trains, we press a button, and some very clever engineers have done it so the brake system in rotation around each of the vehicles makes a very light brake application, which heats the brake disc to 100 degrees Celsius and also provides a scraping of that. So no speed reduction, and enhances safety, so a big one. So talked about the depots. We had 9 facilities that we enhanced, primarily for the Nova, but we did a couple for our 185 fleet, and that was the projects in my portfolio. So you can see those across the north, and a £35 million spend. On the train fleet as a whole, that's £500 million worth of 44 new trains. So £500 million we've spent on those trains. Here's some images. So that's top left hand is the servicing facilities we put that Alstom put in at Longsight. Top right is new servicing facilities in Glasgow at Palmer D. The centre picture is we extended the fueling and servicing roads in York. That was again a bit of a technical challenge for working with Siemens, because at the far end of the shed in the distance, there is a road, and that's where the depot boundary. So if anybody ever wanted to expand the train fleet, you'll have to build a bridge across that road to extend that shed. Bottom left is the Edge Hill, Liverpool, Alstom's facility there. I think I bought the most expensive water tap in the world there. Great value from Alstom. And on the right is one of our Nova 3 sitting in our new facility in Scarborough. So that's all the sort of up front, but behind it all is the key building blocks about infrastructure. As you might have seen on the video, I touched on that there are 15 new or legacy rolling stock projects in the north of England and Scotland. We work together with other operators like Northern and CAF to bring those all as a single point. So actually you only survey the site once, whether it's for a CAF train, a Northern train, or somebody else's. So 500 sites surveyed across the north, and we several £1 million worth of gauging enhancements done. We had a small number of platform extensions, primarily for our 185 fleet, unfortunately only one key to Nova, and we're in the process of installing ASDO beacons and balizes to support the system. And at some point we might be using the automatic power changeover facility on the Nova 1. And also with an ASDO system reliant on GPS, you are reliant on the driver stopping in the same place all the time, because the train doesn't know exactly where it is on a platform. So we put huge numbers of stop markers to get the driver stopping in the same place every time. And as I said at the bottom, catering logistics. Bringing all this, the catering, which is again new to TPE, was all the Atlas carts and what you'll see on an aircraft, but you also see on LNER or Avanti. One of the factors in the bid, there was a bit of a gap because the shore bases needed support that was missed out of the bid. So that's a big factor in terms of just physically finding the space to support that. Again, fortunately, using conceptually the same system as airlines and a base at Manchester Airport. So we've obtained a facility there to support our trains. Some of the challenges as I come towards the end, as I touched for our fleet team, moved from a single fleet relationship with Siemens to massive multiple relationships, just even on a practical level. The fleet team, it's about a 10-minute ride between the head office in Manchester and Siemens' main place in Manchester. Now, it might not be an overnight stay because you've got to go and have a contract meeting at Craig and Tinney. So just the explosion of relationships. A modern train, connected train, you saw there, whether it's seat reservation, passenger information system, CCTV, passenger counting, train management system, an absolute explosion of data and systems. And that's still a big ongoing. And again, I learn is actually having a systems integration and project manager, because it's not just about the train, it's how it connects to your legacy IT systems, how it talks through the ether. So that's a big challenge for us. Step difference in food hygiene. Why, thinking, why is that? Well, actually, there's a high consequence issue for safety and reputation. If you poison somebody, that will close a restaurant, and not just close it, but if you did that, very low risk, as in with the appropriate controls. But if you get it wrong, you'll be the first news story on the news. Change from a relatively homogeneous operation to multiple incompatible fleets. So screw couplings at different height, are both technically, contractually, and operationally different, but we've endeavoured to make the customer experience as aligned as possible, and that's really, really important. It's not about the trains and it's about the people who pay my wages and the customers. Make it the best that you can for those. We bought although we've got 44 new trains, we bought relatively small bills, 12, 13. If you compare us to say what Greater Anglia bought with their Aventura fleet, South West Railways is in their Aventura, but the small build demand the same effort as large scale fields. You still need one train testing. It's one design. So it's been a big effort from us. And another factor is that we get compared to other trains that have been refurbished or refreshed. Well, actually, our train and everybody's modern train has to be fully standard compliant with the relevant standard, whereas a refreshed train doesn't. So as an example, ScotRail have taken on some HSTs, ex-Great Western, and refurbished them. They are not compliant with the PRM TSI. There are certainly, people see that as, you just fit wheelchair spaces, wheelchair accessible toilets, and a PIS system and doors that don't need a handle to open. It's a bit more than that, but yes, that train is not compliant. It meets all the relevant standards it has to, but it is not a like-for-like comparison with a modern train. Turning the bid into reality, I touched on that. Big thing was the CAF explosion of success in the UK. They've got multiple contracts, big strain on demand exceeding supply of resources. So a bit of feast and famine in new rolling stock in the UK. There aren't that many people who've done it, and so that's been a big change. And it's not just the manufacturers and the expertise, but finding test paths, finding test resource, huge demands of all sorts. Multiple fleet introductions across the north, and I've talked about straining resources. And Network Rail devolution, that's been a real, I'd say actually been one of our biggest Achilles heel, where different parts of the organisation taking different. I'll be personal, not the biggest fan, still not seeing the benefit, and particularly for TransPennine across operation across 3 routes, but certainly in the world of new trains, we benefited from the excellent team in the central compatibility team, but trying to implement some things which one route has done but the other one hasn't, so it starts from scratch, and it really needs to look over the fence of its routes a lot more to really put passengers first. Quality of asset knowledge, there's 500 sites, lots of stuff to go out and survey, because the national gauging database says there's a problem. When you go and survey it, you find no, there isn't. Not only is that time consuming, but actually trying to budget for this when you go, right, the system has said there's 50 sites that potentially need infrastructure intervention. Well, actually our run rate was about 10% of those. But if I have to go to my board and ask for several hundreds of £1,000s and then come back and go, actually, no, I didn't need all that money after all, that's a significant credibility issue. Compatibility versus acceptance. You used to need to have the blessing of Network Rail through acceptance. It's now the word of the talk, demonstrated compatibility, but certain parts of Network Rail still work in the world of acceptance culturally, and that really needs to. It's improved, definitely improved, but it's still not improved fast enough. The ability to deliver efficiently with small scale tasks. So if you want like a very small activity, I wanted some stopboards installed just off the network. I've got a contractor who's putting them on the platform for a few £100, because it's basically the same activity for Network Rail was going to cost me 30 grand. So really, they're just not built up to deal with small scale tasks, and a significant thing of loss of corporate memory. I bought high-speed coasting supported by colleagues in another top as well 10 years ago, pantographs putting up and down. All that memory is gone, and it's been a real constraint trying to relearn that. Nearly done. So again, dealing with a global supply base. I know this may sound a bit strange in the world we're sort of trying to live at the moment, but my team has spent, across the globe, lots in Europe. So, for instance, 5 or 6 sites in Spain, an ASDO system from Finland, a CCTV system from Germany, a PI system from Belgium, testing all over the place. We did, my team and I did a lot of travel. So in 2018, I did 59 flights. That was a flight, more than a flight a week. But as Liam, my project manager on Novasu, we may have gone far and wide across Europe, and it may look like a glamorous jet set, but believe you me, airport concourses and industrial estates look very much the same way everything in the world. He did say there's a slightly better quality of industrial estate in Europe. So I do have a video. I don't know, are we going to go and try and give this a whirl, or do we? Let's try and give this a whirl. Okay, apologies, Sills, that we're not getting the sound. So I'm going to have a go at trying to talk through this. So this was the advertising campaign that we did to promote our Nova fleets and TPE. Massive logistic challenge here to get. We did filming in Scarborough with the real trains. Not only we had to do that, but we had to take the seats out of them for the crew to work on this side. But also at the same time, we were responsible. Get these trains moved was significant. And as you can see, here's in the shot. Here's some of my colleagues that who supported us in Scarborough. But as I said, the campaign was this combination of puppetry with green screen and then actually using the real thing. It's available on YouTube if you want to have a look at it, the video. We're very proud of it. And I'm also particularly proud, as though it says there, the voice of Dame Julie Walters is the voiceover. But Chris, my project manager, who's the curly hair one that you saw in the shot, he's also part of that. Sorry we didn't be able to enjoy the full video experience, but so here's some stills. As you see, we did most of the interior shots on the Nova 3 on the right-hand side, which sat in the platform that's on the left-hand side. But my marketing colleagues for the money shot wanted the more pointy nose of the Nova 1. And not only did we use that for video, but we shot a lot of our high definition stills for sort of billboards, taxi, all the sort of where you'll see printed media of advertising. One very quick story about this was that that was a significant logistical challenge to get the trains there. And so we only at the time had one liveried Noble 1. It was stuck in Liverpool. We had to get it over from Edge Hill. Some of the maintenance paperwork wasn't quite in the right place that it needed to be, but some great work by colleagues at Hitachi and Siemens made that happen. We then trying to find Traincrew to move it from Doncaster, find a slot on the network. This was a Thursday lunchtime. Got a good, said, yeah, great, got the slot on the network, got the driver, brilliant. Then thought I'd just make a call about 3 o'clock because I was going to work at it. Said from the marketing team, and they said, oh, is it the right way round? And it was like, what do you mean, is it the right way round? And they said, oh no, we want the first class at a particular other at one end and standard. Of course, I knew it was the wrong way round. So if anybody's tried to turn a train, it had to get a different path, cost on the network, another 2 hours, find a driver who signed the route. By some miracle, we managed to get that done. And then, as you see in that bottom picture, there's one of the cleaners at Scarborough bushing it up for its debut the following morning. However, just as we're about 20 minutes out of Scarborough, signal check, report of a cow on the line. So we're now in the dark trying to find a cow and make sure we didn't hit it. No cow on the line. Went through the affected section. Great. What's all this? Following day, I went back to the site. Train gets checked again. And there's this big black cow. So that would have been really good to sort of prang that on the way to its filming debut. Right. So I've talked a lot about technical stuff and standards and compliance and contracts and whatever, and hard work. But the real hard work and what really makes the magic happen is this. It's people. People are what makes the difference. You can have whatever contract you've got with whoever, but unless people buy into something, make the commitment. This has been a huge amount of effort from a great bunch of people and a lot of people. And these are just some of the images over time. Where it's the trade union representatives who we consulted with, the designers in the factory, the guys testing, servicing our trains, my colleague in major projects. But this is it, and I'm particularly proud of these guys. So the guys you saw, most of them in the video. So Chris and my boss on the right hand side, and my 3 project managers, and we did, and then Nick, he's the behind the scenes. Nick was responsible for all our depot builds, part of the fleet team at TransPennine. So Abs, Liam, Chris, and Chris, this is what's really been part of making the magic happen. And we were very pleased when we did our big launch event in Liverpool, and there you see all our 3 fantastic trains, and that's it. So questions?
Thanks, Robin. Thank you very much for spending the time to share that very interesting presentation with us. And I'm going to hand over to Elliot now, who's been looking through the questions that you've been sending through, and he's going to ask them to you, Robin. So thanks very much from us in the Northwest.
Okay, so the first question I've got here is from Simon, and that is, what journey time savings have been found with the ability to run along the West Coast Main Line without tilt compared to the Class 350s and Avanti West Coast tilting Class 221 and 390 fleets?
Okay, so I'm just trying to sort of get the technology. Oops, no. Can you still see the screen?
Yep.
Right. So part of we are currently still running at the 110 maximum speed. Part of the testing was that we bought 125 mile/hour units, so we needed the ability to demonstrate compatibility to do that. So a number of sites were assessed by CAP and Hitachi to enable us to do that, but not the full through all the way into Scotland. But the process that we followed can and potentially will be applied for that. So it's not just about the journey time saving, it's about part of it is actually getting the slot. So if you're running alongside other trains that can do that speed, from a planning point of view, you want it, the wider the speed envelope, so the bigger the gap between the slowest train and the fastest train actually is one of the things that eats capacity. If you could narrow that band together, your ability to run more trains on the network. Because sometimes if you think about when you're driving down the motorway and there might be some congestion, actually people trying to drive at different speeds, and that's why the sort of what you see in terms of smart motorways was brought in to be able to do that. So it probably is overall a few minutes, but not that many minutes in terms of journey time. But it's actually being able to get the relevant slots and the best. So some of our West Coast slots, we had to take stops out. We didn't have a common pattern service because we had to take those out because we wouldn't, if we stopped at that station, we wouldn't be able to get the slot on the network. So it's not just about overall journey time, it's getting the right slots on the network as well. Oh, sorry, the other thing I should say about that is one of the factors is that there is a process we need to follow to be able to, because how do we communicate this? Because the EPA, the enhanced permissible speed boards that are on the West Coast mainline, because not every, you do still need tilt for some of those locations. You know, it's not a complete carte blanche. So how are we going to communicate that to drivers in terms of signage? So that bit still has to be worked through, yeah, to be able to release that full potential. Okay.
Thanks. Hopefully that answered your question, Simon. We'll just move on to the second one. That's from James. So this is: would it be possible, and do you have plans to substitute the Class 68 locos for electric locos, such as Class 88s, in the future, to assist in the pursuit of decarbonisation with the TransPennine upgrade?
So yes, the design of the coaches is that if you had another locomotive, and whether that was a pure electric or a bi-mode, but these services predominantly operate over non-electrified routes. So there's obviously between the small section between Manchester and the airport and Manchester and Liverpool, but the majority, and a section between York and when we run through to Middlesbrough, but the majority do that. So, and if you take the Class 88 locomotive, which DRS, which looks very similar, and you could do the same modifications in principle with them, and you said even if the TransPennine route was wired between York through to Manchester, you still have the 40 odd miles to Scarborough, that and the Class 88 locomotive currently doesn't have a powerful enough engine to maintain that. I know that Rail Operations Group, it's tri-mode, but primarily the 88 was bought fundamentally as a sort of obtain the benefits, significant benefits of electric, not just in decarbonisation, but tractive power. But you're really looking at the sort of last mile into a siding or a yard. So yes, it's possible, but it's about having the right locomotive to be able to deliver that for the passenger operation that we do. Okay.
So this one's from Simon. So I'm just move on to this. This is: were any considerations given to procuring fleets with better platform to train accessibility, as seen with the low-floored level boarding offered by Greater Anglia's new Stadler fleets?
Yeah, well, so there is definitely a benefit with what Stadler done, but the big challenge, and I think the best example of this is the new Stadler Merseyrail train, was actually the focus needs to be on the infrastructure, and I've said this in a public forum before, that the franchisee has a very, very short horizon in it. There is only 10% of the national network that has compliant platforms, and actually we as a nation need to be funding that first, because Stadler, the GA unit, it still doesn't. It provides level platform boarding at certain locations, but there is a wheelchair ramp, and I've got a photograph. I've been on it. It's still got stepping distance issues. It's not a panacea, believe you me. Whereas the Merseyrail system that's where you've taken a system approach, because you can, because it's a metro operation. It's a bit like the Tube, really, where the stations have been rebuilt, the trains have been built, the whole thing has been aligned together. You can go back, and I'll take this way back to when the Tyne-and-Wear Metro was introduced in 40 years ago. That was rebuilding of stations and trains to work together to provide level boarding. You need to look at it holistically, but until we really seriously, and if you can see in the picture there, we've still got curves. They're still not going to produce that, even at the rebuild at Lime Street. And we need to do that as a progressive. You can't just wave a magic wand and the whole network be done. But we've missed too many opportunities, I think, in control periods for bids by by Network Rail and the government to sort of say, work together to have a rolling program of platform works. That's the focus you need to do rather than the rolling stock.
Thanks. I think we've got just one more question. This one's from Malcolm. So from plan to implementation, how many years has a Nova fleet taken to come to fruition? And did you find a hurdle throughout the process which hindered this?
Right, so the TPE franchise started 1st of April 2016. We had all, so it's roughly, so where are we now? So we're 4 years, and we still haven't got all of our fleets, but we've got the vast majority of them. So obviously the delays that we had from CAF, that's probably the most obvious biggest one. But I think putting that aside, and for other, anybody who gets involved in this, I think probably one of our biggest challenges was actually the ability, how quickly or not we could actually train people. We operate across a congested network. Somebody saying, right, well, I want to now have a training path to do that. Well, actually, if you've got a congested network, you're not really going to find another path, whether it's you can't get enough passenger paths. So why do you think you're going to get an empty for a training? So I think anybody for that, you need to be looking really far ahead. Also in that would be the agreements that in terms of whether they're flexible or not flexible, depending on your point of view with your staff representatives on conditions of service, to be able to, because it takes several days, quite a lot on coaches. It's a 16-day training program. If you say, right, that needs to be continuous, well, people have to have time off. That's natural. But equally, if you say you have any form of network disruption or whatever, the training train is the first one that's going to kick off. And some of that you might have to restart again. So I think those are the sort of operational aspects that any new trains program has to consider. Is how do you actually train everybody whilst you're still running a service? And it was well publicised the level of cancellations that TPE was implementing and suffering onto our customers last year. And part of that was we had to bite a bullet and we had to take trains out of service to be able to get people trained to deliver the benefits that are now manifesting itself.
Okay, thanks very much, Robin. Cheers for that, everybody, and keep your eye out on the YRP website for any more events coming up. I know there's a few in line, and the Northwest will certainly be doing more. Certainly, collaborations with the Northeast are planned. So thank you all for attending, and thanks, Robin, for your time.
That's all right. All right, guys.
Cheers. Bye.